Hello everyone, we are with Laruga Glaser. That's how you pronounce your last name. I'm usually terrible with last names. Thank you so much for making time for this podcast. Laruga is teaching a 5-day workshop in Madrid. It's actually the second time that you come.
Yeah, second time here.
So it's been fantastic. I came practice with you last year, and I remember that you changed my kapotasana upside down. It's not about the asana, really it's about what you learn when someone gives you something that you were not doing. So that's something that I appreciated, and I've been working this full year on that refinement of the backbends, which is something that I appreciate. And then this year you're dropping in something more, like the handstand, making my shoulders shake.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are very grateful that you came to Madrid and that you agreed of doing this podcast, this little chat. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. But I will also say about the kapotasana, because I noticed
You
that
did.
you worked on it.
Yeah.
But see, I like that. I really respect it from a distance, because I was like, wow, like you know, when you take hold of the technique and you build on the skills, and then I don't have to do anything else, you know. But I just really respect when someone follows through with the work. And then it's time to go to the next level.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the thing that's really beautiful to see when you have to step away and then they work on the skills, you know, and then it's like, and then also you probably figured out things for yourself that I didn't teach you, obviously, you know, like it's just about connecting dots. But yeah, mad respect for that.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I can see that. There are many things in your teaching that stand out for me. It's something that I mentioned as we were having breakfast. I get the feeling that you're really good at, well, first, you remember people. You remember, like, from one year to the next. You do remember, and I can tell that you are quite alert in your mind. You're quite present. But you have this great skill of giving something for people to work on, and then giving space. Otherwise, we tend sometimes to be a little too intense, a little suffocated even.
Yeah, I think I really like this process. Like when you're first working with someone, there's a sense of like the student's a bit dependent, and then there's this space of interdependence, like between. So the teacher and student working together, and then I always like when students become independent. Like they don't need me at that stage anymore. They can hold their own, and then we can take things to the next level. You know, and I think that's part of the craft of teaching, is to make yourself irrelevant at certain stages, and then you know, that's when you know the teaching's worked.
Yeah.
But I also trust that I trust that every human being can find that connection inside themselves. Sometimes as a teacher, you're just pointing out what they may not see.
Yeah.
But I trust that they will see it, and I trust that they're going to find it. I think that's where the space comes in, is that there's trust. Because I have felt that in my own journey as well. So I think, and that's what it's all about. Everyone has to find it within themselves. So, and then we just have a few helpers along the way.
Yeah. There's something that you mentioned, like making yourself irrelevant. And it's funny because sometimes I tell, no, it's exactly so good. Sometimes I say to students as well that at the end of the day we are adults, dealing with each other.
Yeah.
And so teaching and practicing, like teacher-student relationship is a relationship. You want two adults that are free and that are strong on their own, and they decide to come together for whatever reason. but this time in their power.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, because actually when you walk into a room with that kind of vibe, that's when real work can happen. There's not that like kind of clinginess, that neediness, that I need you to figure things out for me.
Yeah.
It's actually something that, because you're quite experienced and you have experience in both teaching a group every day, like in your Mysore program in Stockholm, and also traveling and teaching students that you might not see, you might have not seen before, and you might not see ever again.
Yeah.
Or maybe you will, but you will. It's a different setup. So, how does the skill set change? The approach, how is it different from your regular group to when you're traveling?
Yeah, so for many years I was teaching every day in Stockholm. Now I'm at the stage where I'm traveling more, and my partner David takes on more of the daily teaching. But I do, when I'm in town, I'm part of the group, I practice with the group, and I do sometimes still teach. And so being with a group of people through the long term is, as a teacher, it's an amazing experience to see that slow unfolding, and to really follow through with students through that long-term experience. And I think that's where a lot of real skills culminate, where they come together. And I think it's such an important part. Like, I so appreciate that. And I think also the relationship between teacher and student can start to mature and solidify over time. And you really get to know each other. Students get to know you better, you get to know the student better. And you may not know everything, but it's almost like an energetic language, that you start to absorb each other's energy. And then like from that kind of foundational space, I feel like I can take that into when I travel and I see different types of students for a shorter period of time, that I come with that same sense of grounding. Of course, I have to accelerate a little bit my knowledge about people. That's why sometimes the first day I work with a group, I may observe more than I give, just to kind of take in everyone's practice. But the other thing I've learned too is I really try to respect the different teachers that have introduced the practice to these individuals. So I don't come in and try to override everything, even though I might have a different way or a different approach. I try to be as respectful as I can be, unless I see something that seems like a total disaster, which is rare, to be honest. But I try to dialogue in a way that is respectful to where someone has come from or who they've been exposed to, while maybe hopefully teaching them something new or exploring something new in their body. And sometimes I make the joke that I'll tell people, like, if I'm with them for a short period of time, I'll tell them I'm a consultant. So I may not be your teacher, because sometimes I have people who have their main teacher, but they might be doing a retreat with me or a workshop, and I'll just say I'm a consultant. So don't go to your main teacher and say, well, Laruga said this, respect your teacher that sees you daily, I try to strike that balance as well.
You touch on something really interesting, which is like having one teacher, but then opening oneself up to different points of view. And sometimes, this is my experience, for some time I was very fixated, and I see that in many people as well, very fixated in having one teacher and keeping that loyalty and that strong connection, to the extreme that I kind of struggle with my own growth. Because sometimes my experience is that you need to open up a bit without losing your reference. But eventually your reference, you become your own reference eventually.
Yeah, I agree.
So what's your take on this? Like this idea of just having one teacher and remaining faithful and even a little militant about it, compared to just browsing around a little bit. How can these two realities come together without excluding each other?
Yeah, I think you make a really interesting point, because I've experienced this myself. Like I have my main teacher, but I've also practiced with other teachers even during that time. And I think the great solidifier is like the practice is the same. Like I'm still doing Ashtanga yoga, and so I have my main framework, how I've been guided with like my main teacher, which is Sharath Jois. But I've been exposed to other teachers, and I don't know, like there's been some things where there's a different point of view, and I'll be adaptable to it. I'll say, okay, in this moment in time, let me try it out, let me experiment with it. But like you said, I have that main like core. And I think too, if you're really maturing in this work, you are also tuning into yourself and what feels right to you. And I think if you have that, you can be exposed to a lot of different things. And maybe, you take something and you're like, wow, I never saw it that way. That's so interesting. I can really utilize this information. And sometimes I receive things and I'm like, oh, I tried it out, not quite working for me. And it doesn't even have to mean any disrespect. It's just like, that's just not my vibe, or it just doesn't suit me at this time. So I've appreciated being exposed to different teachers. And at the same time, I know who my core teacher is, who I actually really make time and effort to see regularly, and I don't think it takes away from that relationship at all. And I think too, the more comfortable you are with yourself and the foundation that you hold, you don't have to be afraid to be exposed to other people, or other ideas. I find that to be so true. I find the more secure I am with myself, the more accepting I am of other points of view, even though I might not align fully with that point of view.
There is something interesting that you mentioned, and that we also talked about before we came live, which is the importance of finding that point of reference inside, and eventually that connection with the practice. It's like developing your own line of practice within the Ashtanga framework, but really taking time to develop an awareness, not only of your body. I think we get sometimes a little blindsided by asana, and we do not understand how it all comes from the breath, and how the mind plays a role as well on your emotions and your expectations and all the things that come with with our human package, this packaging, and how all those things kind of start to play out on the yoga mat. And so an important part in this Ashtanga practice, if you want to make it long-term, beyond the decade, and you really want to grow and feel that this is something that you are inspired to do, even though it's hard. Though it's a lot of work, a lot of energy. It's important to develop that connection. And so when you see people having doubts in their practice, or going through like a rough patch, which it will happen several times. How do you handle this type of situations, or even if they're not going through a rough patch, just like having doubts and like not being sure of why are they doing all this Ashtanga yoga? How do you address that?
Yeah, I mean, doubt comes with the path, I think. like a spiritual path, any type of like sadhana, I think doubt will creep in. It's like an obstacle we all have to cross. The same thing with boredom. The need for stimulus, you know, and, I need something new, I need this, I need that. And, you know, I remember even one time having a bit of doubt about Ashtanga, but when I realized I was absorbing other people's stuff, like hearing a lot of other people's opinions about things and kind of letting it creep into my mind. And then I just started, and then I finally became aware of that. Like, oh, I've let other people's opinions and their doubts creep into mine, you know, into my mind. But I think, you know, sometimes I've had, you know, it's come up with certain students I work with where they might have been flowing really easily in the practice, but all of a sudden they come up to a posture that's very difficult. And they're a little bit surprised, or they feel resistance they didn't feel before. And I think too, I try to address, and I felt this myself, where it is all part of the journey. It's all like, we're going to go through all these different types. We're going to feel frustration at times. We're going to feel anger. We're going to feel even this idea of like feeling attached, you know, to certain poses, and or even repelled by certain parts of the practice. Fear comes up with certain poses. I think that's why it's so such an interesting part of the method with all the variety of poses. We are going to come up against all of those emotions. And I just love, that's, you know, for my own practice, I always have to remind myself is that what we're bringing what is unconscious, conscious. And I think that I have to remind myself of that, especially when you get caught up in the physicality of everything. Do you know? And like, and the mental clearing we're going through. Because a lot of times when we come to the mat we feel heavy, and sometimes it's because we're mentally heavy, you know, and the thing that I've reconciled, because I've definitely have felt moments of resistance, feeling like, oh, am I going backwards instead of forwards in the practice, you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's all a part of being alive. You know, like I think it's part of living in a body is that we're here to experience all of these things. And sometimes people, when they move past that high, everyone has felt that Ashtanga high. Sometimes I feel like the real work happens once that high dissipates. And I think then we start to come into a space of true empowerment and acceptance. You know, and then also going into the unseen parts of the practice. So, in a way, the physicality and the excitement of the poses is what hooks us at first. And then we start to go into the deeper work later. But that's where the true rewards are. You know, even though it doesn't seem that way at first. So.
This something I usually mention, which is not part of the yoga propaganda, how you're gonna face or come up with all these tendencies, like fear at times, frustration, thinking that feeling powerless, or you're gonna come up with anger, jealousy. You're gonna be comparing yourself. You're even gonna experience the weakness of your mind. I'm gonna give you an example. I moved back from London from London to Madrid 2016. In London, I had fantastic teachers. I was practicing a very thriving shala. And so you got carried away by people's energies. And there was an aspect of performance there as well, if I'm honest. But then I started running a program here, and I was practicing on my own. And to me, it changed everything completely. And now, when I put myself into the space with more practitioners, I'm so used to practicing on my own that all of a sudden, sometimes I just crumble under pressure. Which is there's no pressure. It's the pressure that I create for myself. You know, like thinking that I am in a room full of people. It's so interesting for me to observe. Like, oh wow.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because sometimes it's good that you were able to experience both. I mean, being in a shala with other practitioners can be very energetic, and it can feel great, to feel like the energetic support. But sometimes there's an external drive, you know, like you were saying, like the performance. And then you have to, when you are in a room by yourself, you have to find the internal drive. And that's a whole other muscle. It's a totally different muscle that you have to like solidify and strengthen. So both can be good, because it is true, like when you're in a room with other people, sometimes you get caught up with the comparison, like you say, it's a bridge you have to cross to understand that that's really unimportant. You know, or envy, or the jealousy, or like, you know, it's all of us have had all those things cross our minds, you know. But we can't heal these things unless they're exposed. You know, so that can be the interesting part of like being in a group. And then when you're practicing by yourself, a lot of different demons come up.
Yeah.
So it's like it can be even harder, you know, like especially because there can be a little bit of a distraction, not in a bad way, like with the group. It's other things that come up, but when you're by yourself, the mind really starts talking to you even louder. And if you can calm the mind when you're practicing by yourself and really become friends with it, then you're really going into something deep. So yeah.
I've also found useful, because this is, I mean, there's not one method that works for everyone. And eventually, we talk about finding this connection with your own practice, which is finding a connection with yourself, growing in your understanding of yourself. You get to know how you work, how your mind works. Also, like at what times during the day your mind is more a little less temperamental and wants to cooperate a little more, which definitely helps. And at that times of the day, the body is not so collaborative. Sometimes, because if you go to the early hours in the morning, I mean, the mind is super fresh. It's like a, you know, white canvas, but the body is like, especially now, January, to below 2 degrees on the street, it's a little harder.
Yeah.
And then, so I think that one part of the work, if you want to do this long term, is like getting to understand your rhythms during the day. When it's easier for you to step on the yoga mat and actually follow through. I think, and this is a conversation that I have with some people sometimes, just if you are working on a practice and you don't have a teacher telling you off, or another practice peers around you, it's so easy sometimes to cut it short, to cut your practice yourself. How do you follow through? And also, how do you allow yourself the space to sometimes go a little softer and without losing the practice and just like remaining accountable? How do you do that?
Yeah, well, it's not easy. Like, I mean, sometimes I feel like I know the answer, and other times I'm really not sure. You know, it's something that even philosophers have talked about for for centuries. It's just this sense of just, you have to get out of your comfort zone to grow.
Yeah.
There's like no way around it. It is, we always work with paradox in the yoga practice, like that to feel empowered, to feel more liberated, you actually have to step out of comfort, which sometimes seems a little bit counterintuitive. And it's a truth that's like a mainstay with many philosophies and a lot of different methods. But we don't have to do it aggressively, you know? And I think the Ashtanga practice isn't designed to be easy, but I think the approach can still be a gradual unfolding. It doesn't have to be pushy or aggressive. And I think too, it's working with a teacher at some point is good to get that push, you know, and then, taking it and see if you can do it on your own. that's also quite interesting. So, but I think, and I've experienced this myself, and I've experienced this with other students who might come and practice with me, that they make that time to get a little bit of that push, because they know maybe they've, softened, or maybe softening is not bad, but maybe gotten a little bit lazy, a little bit, you know what I mean? Or not holding themselves accountable. But with that said, I think sometimes it's okay to have certain seasons. The longer that you practice, you're going to realize that you go through some dips, and then you go through growth, you go through some plateaus, and just as in life, and I think also being able to ride those waves too is, we have to leave room for that. I think that's really important. But what keeps me going personally is I just feel like I'm invested in the transformation that's taking place, and I like who I am more when I do the practice. I feel like I'm calmer, I'm steadier, I'm less reactive, and I think, so I always have to remind myself of those. And it's interesting, they're always unseen attributes. People can feel them, of course, but it's like I appreciate who I've become through the vehicle of the practice. So that's kind of what keeps me going and keeps me motivated, even though there are times I have felt less inspired. And it takes work to stay inspired.
Another thing, which is along the lines of what we were talking about, and that I usually mention it a lot because it comes up for me a lot. Just in the West, we have this idea of positivity, having to feel good and to be positive and a positive outlook. And we don't honor all the shadow side that we all have. And that's going to come up on the yoga mat. And it's not something as simple as, I can't put my leg behind the head. It's all the triggers, all that not being able to put your leg behind your head. Just giving you a silly example, all that it triggers. And what makes, all that it triggers. And so what you said, we have to make space for life to unfold. There are highs, there are lows, there are plateaus, and there are times when you feel completely in love, other times when you have to try a little harder to stay on track. I think that's something important to do. And this applies to practice, and it also applies to teaching. I've seen something that I noticed is that there is a very fine line between loving what you do and hating it, being burned out. So you're giving, and at some point, how do you refill? How do you feel replenished in a way?
Well, I think to hold space for other people, because you brought up a lot of interesting things, like to hold space for other people in a very authentic way, you have to have gone down through the dark within yourself, and also to go up. I really like, I'm paraphrasing, but also when Carl Jung had said something about you have to go down into the depths to experience like great joy. And I've gone through a number of dark times, which is not unique, but I think too, really exploring all of that. You can't heal things unless they get a bit exposed. Not just a bit, they need to be exposed. And life isn't always about love and light, you can't just love and light everything away. And what I've noticed is that in a Mysore space, because I know both my partner and I, we've realized this, like holding space for other people, like we're at a point where we've heard it all. Like students have shared some things with us that can be pretty dark, but because both of us have gone through our own darkness, it doesn't intimidate us at all. Like we're like, yeah, we have room for that. Of course, there's a certain, people can't just melt down in a way that's kind of, overwhelming for others in the room, but which, doesn't happen. But people have shared stuff with us in confidence, things that they're working through, and we just really come with a space of non-judgment and this is, we're not psychologists, we're not trying to be therapists or things like that, but we also really, I feel that when you have done your own work, you can hold even more space for people, and in a very authentic way. And I think it's so important. And I think that, in this aspect of, because I feel like in one way I'm an optimistic and positive person, but in the other sense, I have no problem pointing things out in an honest way, But I've also learned not everyone wants to hear the truth. That's kind of also quite interesting. But I think at the crux of everything, to really go deep in the yoga experience, you have to be totally invested in the truth in all instances, within yourself, within how you navigate your life. I think it's such a core attribute. It's something I'm still investigating. I'm not sitting here claiming that I'm perfect in all of these ways, but it's something that I'm totally invested in, in exploring. I want to unpack everything. But yeah, that's the part that's been so interesting for me is that I still feel in my own body. That's the maturity that happens in the asana practice. That there's some stuff I'm still holding on to. And I'm kind of like, oh, that's so interesting. Maybe I'm not ready to let it go. I kind of want to, but there's something still, that I'm holding on to at times. So it's really, really interesting. And I think it's all an exploration. And I really acknowledge that, I don't have the answers, but I'm just willing for them to unfold and show themselves to me. And the thing that I ask, because I do believe in a higher power. Maybe I'm a little, some people might not like that, but sometimes I ask, or you can say grace. I ask grace, or whatever you want to call it, that I just have the eyes to see it, when it comes. I want to have the eyes to see. I want to have the ears to hear, so I want to be open to receive whenever it comes. That's kind of where I am right now. Do you know? Because I don't have the answers, but I want to see it when it comes.
It's actually, you're bringing to mind something that Sharath Jois said in a conference in Mysore once, which is, he did not make, and I think this is so true, but he did not make any difference between practicing and teaching. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's actually the same mindset.
Yes.
There's no such thing as difference. And then he also says you need to be clear in your mind and as sharp and as alert as possible, so that when knowledge comes, you can grasp it. Just what you said.
Yeah. No, that's so interesting because, it doesn't surprise me that Sharath Jois said that, and also it reminds me of also this. Long back, I used to study a course in miracles where it just talked about.
I know about that. That's a book, isn't it?
Yeah. It talks about being vigilant. It's the same thing that you mentioned that Sharath Jois was talking about. That just the vigilance and just being awake in all moments. I guess it's just also about presence. It's not always easy because there's so many things in modern culture that wants to put us asleep. Yeah, exactly.
It's a big one.
Yeah, or distract us. Yeah, to distract. I see it in my time where I'm like, whoa, you've gotten distracted here. super interesting. It's a battle now, like just to stay mentally clear.
I remember I felt this battle big time. Like, I'm gonna share something a little personal with you. When I moved from London, the culture is different in the UK compared to Spain. And I had been abroad for a few years. Then I came to Spain, and everyone was like very chatty at 6:30 in the morning. Whereas in London, you really don't get to talk. You're just like, you're on your mat. You might have people around you, but they're like, hey, how are you? There's no such thing as small talk at that time. But here, like, it's like kissing and hugging and asking about your life. And for me, that was like a big shift. I was not ready for that. And so I was also going through some hard time in my personal life. And every ounce of strength that I had to keep it inside. With that, like avoiding what seemed to me to be a distraction, even though it's part of the culture and people did it because they appreciate you, which is a beautiful thing. But to me, it was like, please don't move me from my center, because I'm like trying really hard to stay here. And the first couple of years, the first 3 years that I was teaching here, I found that to be the main challenge. And so there is something that you mentioned over breakfast before, which was about the boundaries that you establish as not only as a teacher, also a student needs to have boundaries as well. We need boundaries. But we are in a yoga room and we are all vulnerable. We are all very open as well. We need to be open, otherwise there's no such thing as yoga happening. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's almost like you experience the opposite from me, like coming from the United States, very open culture, people super chatty, like, and then I go to Sweden, where no one talks to anyone. So it's like, I'm like, whoa, okay, this is different. But I learned that it's interesting because as a teacher, you do have, you have to have some space with the students, because, and the students might not be conscious of it, some might be, but they'll consume you. If they can. They'll just eat you all the way up. And if they can take your energy, they will. But again, I don't say that in a bad way. Like, not everyone is conscious that that's what's taking place, right? So, I've had to learn over time to just like, to facilitate a space, and I'm actually super, super sensitive. Like sometimes, because, and a part of me is introverted, but I'm very sensitive. Like I feel people very deeply. But some people wouldn't think that because I create space. Sometimes like teachers that are like too consuming in the students, they actually may not feel as deeply because they're pulling from another place. They want attention, or they actually can take from the energy from the students. So for me to really feel people intuitively, there has to be space. I need space to observe and to look and to view. But the other thing is I actually sincerely want students to become practitioners for themselves, not for me. And I that's very clear to me. And when students want to when they want something else, if they're not there for the independent journey that you have to go on to authentically know yoga, they're not going to like me. I know that quite clearly. They're not going to really like my way. Because I just, some people might think that I'm strict in some moments, but it's more that I'm into empowerment. I want practitioners to be empowered. I want them to have skills to navigate the practice, hopefully at some point, in a way where they become very mature in understanding of the method for themselves. So, when you feel deeply of students, like there has been times I have felt, hurt and things of that sort. Like when sometimes because sometimes teachers can not be so nice, but sometimes students can not be so nice either. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing where I've had to learn to kind of swallow things and just kind of be like, okay, allow that to just kind of marinate and just kind of wash over me. Sometimes it's not always so easy. Yeah. But these boundaries are so important in a way that it makes students, they may not realize that it makes them feel more secure in the space too. The more grounded and centered you are as an individual. And it transcends words and creating a vibe. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I'm not that type of person that needs to create a vibe in the room. I don't want attention when I'm teaching Mysore. But what you realize is when you create that space, an elevating energy comes through, and that's through trust. Do you know, of the method of understanding what yoga is. And it's not coming through me, it's just that you're allowing it to envelop the space. So when you come into a space and bring a lot of shenanigans, it actually kind of downgrades things, in a way that it's just something that I've learned. I think it goes back to what I mentioned early on in our conversation, is this sense of trust. Do you know, like there's something working, in the energy in the universe that we just have to leave space for, and it has a way of taking care of things.
I think that's a good skill to develop as a student, as a teacher, eventually as a practitioner. Because we're all practitioners, we're probably at different stages in our journeys, but we are all practitioners. So you are in a Mysore room. I mean, you or myself or some other people, we are in a Mysore room, and we all carry our expectations and our fears, our insecurities, our delusions, which are very real things inside. And it's just something we mentioned before as well, this student teaching mantra, sahana, bhavatu, sahana. Let's have this clarity of our own imperfections, and let's try to work together, leaving our imperfections on the side as much as possible. So let's try to keep our eyes open. You need to give yourself space first to do that, and when that happens, you kind of do the same with the other person that you're working with. And so, what makes a community healthy? Not cult-like, or not individuals being bound by trauma or stuff like that. Yeah. Just like a healthy place where people come to work and transform.
I mean, what I try to do is just facilitate space for practice. That's it. If someone wants to, come to me to the side, if a student wants to ask me certain things, I'm open to share. But I try to just kind of keep it very clear on the practice and just facilitating a space of practice. And then I think from that space, each individual, each student, each practitioner is going to come to their own truth or how they need to navigate their life. A good example is what to eat. That's the big one. But also, part of it is to tune into your body, tune into your heart, to be conscious when you take in food, and then you're going to know what you need. Sure, there's some guidelines out there. If a student were to come directly to me, I don't preach too much of that anymore. I just want people to connect internally, to be grounded and centered in themselves, and then they can come to their conclusions on things. And it's a journey that I've had to take, because I used to always have to find the answers. Oh, maybe this person has the answer, and this person, and this person. Yeah. No, it will never come outside of you. It will only come from inside of you. And I think that is really the true power of asana practice. I mean, unfortunately now, asana is like, seen as like, the more extreme you go, the better, or the more advanced you are, the better, or whatnot. But the true beauty of asana is that you connect to first your physical body, and then your internal body, and then your intuition, your truth. And that's quite powerful, because I always say this: your body will not lie to you ever. This will. I always say this will lie to you. Your mind will lie to you. Like all the rationalizations, the projections, the judgments, your opinions and your ideology, it's all up here. But your body will always tell you, this doesn't feel right, or this does feel right. So asana practice is really a great gateway for that. However, there are some communities that fill students' minds with a lot of stuff. I try not to fill people's head with too much things. And I do teach, in my retreats, I teach philosophy. But I also like to ask questions, because I want to hear from others. Some people aren't always they don't feel so free at first to speak up or to ask certain questions. But what I like to do is to create dialogue that let's just explore. Maybe we don't have the answers, and that's okay. And maybe two different truths can live in the same space. A lot of people's minds can't take that.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks everything is black and white, So, and I used to be like that. I used to be more black and white. But what I learned is when you're dogmatic and you have a lot of ideology and you think life is black and white, you're actually quite insecure.
Yeah. You need to hold on to something.
Yes. Yeah. But when you can kind of embrace a lot of different things and not be so triggered, or even listen to another point of view and not be so freaked out by it, then you start to realize you can that you've come a long way. And that's another reason why I like to kind of force myself to hear different points of view to see if I have a trigger. And that's the other beautiful thing of asana practice, to be grounded and centered within yourself. It doesn't matter. Some people can, catch their thighs and back or whatever, but they might not be grounded and centered.
That's right.
And that's when you really know the asana practice has worked.
Yeah, that's very true. There's something that a friend told me once, which is this is not, actually, in her own words, it was the questions are richer than the answers. And if you think about it, yoga is self-inquiry. This is like this method, the neti. I am not this, I am not this. What am I? I'm not sure, but I know what I'm not.
Yeah.
So you start kind of unraveling that mystery just by not only asking questions, but just staying in that space of not knowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's when I know I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
And also when I listen to other people, that there's a little bit of openness, because when some people when they feel like they have everything locked down, to me it's a bad sign. I mean, of course there's certain truths compassion is always good, kindness is always good. I'm talking about other things, I'm talking about sometimes when people get locked up into political things or that, when they just really think, when it becomes quite dogmatic, to me I get a little bit okay, and the reason why, I've seen it in myself, I've seen that way, but it doesn't always work, and it seems to bring more suffering. So, now I try to, and I don't always get it right, but I just try to navigate life with more curiosity, and like you were mentioning, asking more questions, I think that just opens things up a little bit more.
Laruga, I'm very grateful for your time. We have to cut it a little shorter today because we have an appointment now. But I'm so grateful for everything that you shared, and also for your teaching in the room. It's been fantastic, and next year when you come, I promise that will have worked in all of the things that you shared.
Oh, I have no doubt.
I am,
no doubt.
yeah, I'm persistent in that way. If, before we finish, if there's one single thing that you would like people to remember from this chat, one takeaway, what would it be?
Oh, wow, that's a big one. Yeah, that just to know that the answers come inside of you. You know, that you have to explore what's going on inside of you. You know, and that's, and I say that because that's something I'm trying to rely on more and more, because I used to not always be in that space.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to say, like, it's always been a pleasure to come to Madrid. I know it's only my second time, but you know, everyone's so warm and so kind, and so I really enjoy being here. So yeah, thank you.
It's fantastic. We'd love to have you here. We can't wait for 2024, 2025, 2026. Yeah, for the Laruga annual visit.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And next time maybe I'll bring David.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Laruga.
Thank you.
Gracias, Miguel. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I would have